in our discussion of the American court system, let's just go. Okay, so here we go. We're going to start with the structure. So the structure of the American court system, we refer to it as a dual court system, D-U-A-L. And what that means is that the left side of this diagram is going to be your federal side, and the right side is going to be your state side. And there is a parallel activity that happens on both sides. Nikita, why do we have national courts and state courts?
So that the powers are separated.
What is it that makes the powers separated? Always the answer. Federalism. Very good. Because everybody has a right to, every authority has a right to say what's allowable and not allowable under the law, which means that they also have a right to then create an adjudication process where they're going to have to settle some kind of dispute. I mean, even a homeowners association, like some of you may have faced that where, not you specifically, but your parents where they got in trouble for something that they did or didn't do to their house, and then they got a fine or some kind of, notice or what. I mean, it happens to lots of people. So that's the same thing. The vast majority of criminal activity is going to fall on the right-hand side. That most of it is defined under state law. But the federal side is also equally important, and there's a little bit of difference because there is a little bit of overlap, okay? So the ones that are going to pop up initially for you, okay, those courts on the screen right now, those are the courts that have what is called original jurisdiction. Original jurisdiction. Original jurisdiction means that that's the first time a case is going to be heard. You're going to have a verdict, like a guilty or innocent, or if it's a dispute between people, you're going to have some kind of settlement. So like an awarding of damages, or, this is your fault or that's your fault. And so where the case will fall is just a matter of who has jurisdiction over it. So, grab my jacket. For example, if Chris is stealing my mail, that's a crime against the United States government because mail is a federal thing. You have to deliver mail. It's federal mail. So that would be a crime right here. If Urte steals a candy bar, that's a crime against the city of Frisco. Okay? If you are, let's say that Michael has a dispute over a will and a big estate, that's going to go to county court. And if Dolly punches a police officer, that is a crime against the state of Texas. So really it's not even about, it's kind of about gravity, but federal laws are not worse than state law. It's just who had a right to say. So if you punch a police officer, that's a crime against the state of Texas. If you murder 20 people, that's a crime against the state of Texas. Like it's not gravity, it's just who had a right to say. Okay? All right. We're going to skip up to the very top one because this is kind of unique. The United States Supreme Court also has a tiny little bit of original jurisdiction. This does not apply to most of the cases that they hear. But if you have a situation where a state sues another state, like so two states are in conflict with one another, that case is going to go to the Supreme Court. So Texas and Oklahoma, they sue each other over the border. So it's the job of the Supreme Court then to define where the border is. And usually it has to do with access to like water or minerals or some kind of resources. And so that would bypass other courts and go simply to the Supreme Court. All right, so these are your original jurisdiction courts. Verdict, guilt or innocence, settlement, jury. Okay? No jury here though, ever. Okay. All right, so then the other kind of jurisdiction we have is called appellate jurisdiction. And appellate is, I was asked to spell it last class. I guess that's not a word we would normally spell. It's A-P-P-E-L-L-A-T-E. Okay, so an appellate court is not looking at guilt or innocence. An appellate court is not like reevaluating and saying, did you do it? No, you really didn't. What they're looking for is they're trying to understand issues of fairness. Did did the police behave in a way that were like, ooh, that's not good. We've decided that's not allowable. Is the process as a whole something that we've decided, no, that doesn't fit with who we are as a people? So in an appellate court, you don't have a verdict anymore. In an appellate court, like all of these, and the Supreme Court, you don't have a jury. You have a panel of judges. That panel of judges is going to be evaluating evidence. They're going to be looking at, well, did the police do what they were supposed to do? Was that person's Sixth Amendment rights protected? Did we have a law that unfairly suppressed freedom of speech? Like, those are the kind of things we're looking for. And so the decisions that they make are not going to be determined based on guilt or innocence. They're looking more at issues of fairness.
And what all did you say was involved with original jurisdiction? That's just a verdict and a jury?
And so another name for original jurisdiction is a trial court, because that's where you have a trial. So the U.S. District Court, city, county, state district courts, or, like I said, that tiny little bit with the Supreme Court. But you guys, that's not even common. Okay? So that's because you're having a trial. So I'm going to kind of walk y'all through this a little bit. All right, let's say that today, Karen has been so quiet all year, right? Like, she sits there, she's such a good kid, she does what she's supposed to do, okay? And today she kind of like flips out. She's like, I just had it. This pressure, this is too much, like, I just can't take it anymore. And so she is over at Walgreens, and she says, I've never really done anything bad, I'm just going to see what I can get away with. And so she steals some nail polish. It's a really good one, too. She takes it and she sticks it in her bag. She's kind of walking around Walgreens, and she heads towards the front door, and the cashier sees her, and she yells, hey, wait, you didn't pay for that. And so Kieran,
She can't get in trouble for it because she hasn't walked out the front door.
Mike, stop. Okay. So Kieran turns around, and then she pulls her gun out, and she points at the cashier, and she says, give me everything you got. And so the cashier gives Kieran $400, and so she walks out into the parking lot, and she's like, oh my gosh, what have I just done? Okay. So she happens to see Jordan sitting in the parking lot there in her car, and so Kieran walks over to the car, she jumps in the passenger side, and she points her gun at Jordan, and she says, drive. And they head east, and they head towards Arkansas over the border, and eventually they are apprehended. Okay. In that moment, Kieran has committed several crimes, right? She stole nail polish because she did go out the door. So that was a crime against the city of Frisco. She robbed a cashier at gunpoint, which is a crime against the state of Texas. And she kidnapped Jordan, which is a crime against the United States government. So then what needs to happen is we've got to decide, well, who's going to try her first? Because she's committed 3 different crimes, and each of them have defined that as a crime. And there's not like a hard and fast rule about that. It's simply a matter of, whose attorney is pushier, who has a better case, who, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just something that they're going to work out. So let's pretend, and we'll say that we're going to try her for kidnapping first, because that's pretty bad. So what's going to happen then is the case is going to be written up, and it's going to be U.S. versus Kieran. Okay? So it's whoever has the trouble, the petitioner, the person who has the problem, versus the person who's being accused or whatever. So, Karen, how are your parents going to feel about all this? Right? They're going to be mortified. Like, what have you done? You've blown it. So they're like disown her. They're like, we're not having anything to do with you anymore. And so the problem is that Kieran's got to go to court, and she can't afford all of this. And so the government, according to the Sixth Amendment, is going to give her an attorney. And that attorney is supposed to be representing her, but her attorney sucks. Like, does a really bad job, forgets to show up, really thinks she's guilty, and so like doesn't even try to defend her very much. And Kieran is very quickly found guilty. So she's sentenced to jail, 20 years, okay, for kidnapping. And she's sitting there, and because she didn't even get to take the AP government exam, now she's sitting there and she's taking community college classes, and she's sitting there and she's studying, and she's like, you know what? I think the Sixth Amendment means that I should have a competent attorney. Not just an attorney, but I should have somebody who really tries to defend me. And so she decides that she's going to file for an appeal. Filing for an appeal then, since this is where she was convicted, is going to follow the arrows and it's going to end up right here. Now, though, the case is going to become Kieran versus the U.S. So it's always written loser versus winner at that point. When she goes before that panel of judges, it's not really her, it's going to be, a different attorney. They're going to argue not about her guilt or innocence, but they're going to argue about the law and the practices. And they're going to say that, well, this practice of appointing attorneys, we really think that the Sixth Amendment means that that attorney has to do a good job. They have to actively try to defend you. They have to really be your advocate. And the circuit court has a couple of options. They can say, doesn't matter, that's not what the Sixth Amendment means, your conviction stands. And then she's kind of done at that point. They could say, you know what, you do deserve a competent attorney. And they could find her, so they could basically retry her. They could send it back to the district court with now a competent attorney and start the process all over. Or they could say, you know what, you're totally right. We think the Sixth Amendment means that you deserve a competent advocate on your behalf, and we are going to set you free. And now you're free. Okay? So who is not going to like that decision if the last one happens? Who?
Jordan.
Well, yeah, Jordan's definitely not going to like it, right? But Jordan's long gone. She's forgiving Kieran. Senioritis. She totally gets it. So who is going to have a real issue, though, with the requirement that we give competent court-appointed attorneys?
A court-appointed attorney.
Yeah, for sure. But who has to pay for those court-appointed attorneys? Who has to do? Yeah, the government has to do all of that. So now they're going to be required not only to give somebody an attorney, but they have to be really good. They have to advocate. So they're probably going to appeal. So if they appeal, then it comes here. And then it goes U.S. versus Kieran. And so that's why they flip, like when sometimes you're reading summaries of cases. The difference is that the U.S. Supreme Court does not hear every case. They hear, I don't know, the smallest number I ever saw was 65 in a year, and the largest I saw was 110. There might be 10,000 cases that go through our court system. I mean, like the applications for cert, and they're going to hear less than 1%. So we're going to look later at, like, what is it that would cause them to really, really want to take up that case. Okay. All right, couple other things. On the left, yes, ma'am.
So, since she got tried in the U.S. District Court first for the kidnapping,
Mm-hmm.
does she get tried again in the city and state district courts
They
for
can.
the other crimes?
Yeah, that's a great question. They absolutely can. And it just depends on what they want to do. And even if somebody, let's say they get the death penalty, or they get like life in jail without the possibility of parole, sometimes still the other entity will try them as a just in case.
Okay.
Because they want to make sure that they stay in jail forever. Like, I always think about those men that did, like, the Oklahoma City bombing, because there was a federal law and a state law that was broken, and one of the guys was tried under federal law first and did not get the death penalty for what he had done, and so then the state of Oklahoma went and tried him afterwards, because they wanted to be sure that he would be in jail for the rest of his life.
Is that how people get, like, life plus 7 or 2 life terms? Is they're getting tried, okay, first they get life for whatever their major crime was, and then they try them for the other thing, and they get, like, 7 years.
It could be that. And in some states, life in prison doesn't actually mean life in prison. You might have the option to get out eventually, like a life sentence might only be 35 years. It just depends on your state. So, and that's why they might do that too. Okay, tell me, Gabby, how does someone get to be a judge on the left-hand side? And? Good. So, all of these people were appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. Okay? Does anybody remember how one gets to be a judge in the state?